At 5:27 p.m. on the 17th of June 2018, a storm spotter near the intersection of Interstate 94 and Highway 18 in West Fargo, North Dakota, reported a funnel cloud. The sky had turned a bruising shade of green. Rain began to fall in sheets. The National Weather Service in Grand Forks had already issued a severe thunderstorm warning 15 minutes earlier. Now the warning was upgraded. At 5:31 p.m., the first tornado warning went out. It was urgent. A confirmed tornado was on the ground, moving east-northeast at 40 miles per hour. The tornado had touched down just south of West Fargo in an open field. It was not a large tornado at first. It looked like a thin rope twisting across the soybean fields, but it quickly grew. Within 3 minutes, it widened to nearly a quarter mile. Its color changed from white to dark brown as it churned up topsoil and debris. The roar was compared later by witnesses to a freight train, but louder, more chaotic. At 5:35 p.m., the tornado crossed the Red River Valley's flat farmland and entered the southern edge of Fargo, the largest city in North Dakota. It struck a residential area near 32nd Avenue South. Homes lost their roofs, garages collapsed, a row of newly planted trees splintered at the base. A minivan was lifted off the driveway of a house on 15th Street and thrown into the neighbor's swimming pool. The family inside the house had taken shelter in the basement. They heard the house groan and felt the pressure drop. When they came out, the sky was clear, but the block was unrecognizable. Minutes later, the tornado moved into a commercial district. It struck a Walmart distribution center, a warehouse that sat low and wide on the horizon. The roof of the warehouse was peeled back in sections, steel trusses twisted like licorice. Inside, workers had been alerted by the tornado sirens and had moved to a designated safe area. No one was killed, but several sustained minor injuries from flying debris. A semi-truck parked in the lot was flipped onto its side. At 5:41 p.m., the tornado hit the Days Inn Hotel near I-29. The building was 2 stories with an exterior corridor. The wind ripped the corridor's roof off and collapsed a wall. Guests had been told to go to the interior hallway on the ground floor. One guest, a truck driver from Minnesota, later described how the windows blew inward and the ceiling tiles rained down. They held onto each other and waited. It lasted maybe 90 seconds but felt like an hour. Then the tornado began to weaken. It passed over Interstate 29, narrowly missing a line of stopped cars. Drivers had pulled over when they saw the funnel. Some tried to outrun it. One family in a minivan was caught in the edge of the circulation. Their vehicle spun once and was pushed into the median. Everyone survived. At 5:46 p.m., the tornado lifted near the intersection of Main Avenue and University Drive. It had been on the ground for approximately 19 minutes. Its path length was nearly 12 miles. The maximum width was half a mile. The National Weather Service later rated it an EF2 on the enhanced Fujita scale, with peak winds estimated at 130 miles per hour. That rating classified it as a strong tornado, capable of destroying mobile homes, snapping large trees, and tearing roofs off well-built houses. But the rating does not capture the chaos that followed. Within minutes of the tornado lifting, emergency services flooded the area. The Fargo Police Department, the Cass County Sheriff's Office, and the North Dakota Highway Patrol set up a perimeter. Sanford Health and Essentia Health activated their mass casualty plans. Ambulances from as far away as Grand Forks were dispatched. Hospitals braced for a wave of patients. Fortunately, that wave never came. The final count showed 37 people with injuries, 3 of them serious. No one was killed. That fact alone made the Fargo tornado remarkable. In the hours after the storm, as the sun set over the broken neighborhoods, the Weather Service offices and emergency managers began asking the same question. How did a tornado that cut through a city of 120,000 people, that destroyed dozens of homes and businesses, that caused an estimated $100 million in damage end with 0 fatalities? Part of the answer was luck. The tornado struck on a Sunday evening. Many businesses were closed or lightly staffed. The Walmart distribution center had fewer than 40 workers on site. The hotel was not full. The residential neighborhoods hit were newer subdivisions where many homes had basements. And the path of the tornado did not cross any schools, nursing homes, or large public gathering places. But luck was only one part. The other part was a system designed to give people time. The National Weather Service in Grand Forks had issued the tornado warning with a lead time of 12 minutes. 12 minutes may not sound like much, but in tornado safety, every minute counts. Those 12 minutes allowed people to stop what they were doing, recognize the threat, and move to shelter. The outdoor warning sirens activated within 2 minutes of the warning. The local television stations broke into regular programming and showed live radar urging viewers to take cover. The emergency alert system sent notifications to mobile phones. Some people received the warning on their phones before they heard the sirens. The warnings were specific. They included the names of cross streets, landmarks, and neighborhoods. They told people exactly where the tornado had been spotted and where it was heading. This was not a generic alert. It was a targeted, almost surgical warning. That kind of precision is the result of decades of investment in meteorology. Doppler radar, storm spotter networks, satellite imagery, and computer modeling have transformed how tornado warnings are issued. In 2018, the National Weather Service was using dual polarization radar, which can distinguish between rain, hail, and debris. When the radar detected a debris ball, a signature of a tornado lifting objects into the air, the warning was updated within seconds. That real-time information saved lives, but the system is not perfect. There were moments during the Fargo tornado that could have gone wrong. The storm spotter who first saw the funnel cloud was a trained volunteer. If he had not been watching at that exact moment, the warning might have been delayed by another minute or two. A single minute could have meant the difference between a family reaching their basement and being caught on the first floor. There was also a failure in communication that night. Several residents in the hardest-hit area reported that they never heard the outdoor sirens. Their homes were downwind of the sirens, or the wind was blowing the sound away. Some said the sirens were drowned out by the roaring of the tornado itself. This is a known limitation of outdoor warning systems. They are designed to alert people who are outside, not inside their homes. Indoor warning relies on NOAA weather radios, television, and mobile alerts. In Fargo, most people had those, but not everyone. In the days following the tornado, the National Weather Service conducted a damage survey. Teams of meteorologists walked the path, measuring debris distribution, analyzing structural failures, and interviewing witnesses. They found that the tornado had exhibited multiple vortices at its peak intensity, smaller subtornadoes spinning inside the main funnel. This explained the patchy damage pattern. Some houses were completely flattened while their neighbors had only broken windows. The survey also revealed that the tornado had been unusually efficient in its destruction. In several blocks, the wind had scoured the ground, removing grass and topsoil. Cars were stripped of their paint by debris, trees were debarked on one side. These were signs of a tornado that was not only strong but also well organized, with sustained winds rather than chaotic gusts. One of the most striking findings was that the tornado had stayed on the ground for nearly 4 miles through an urban area without killing anyone. In that distance, it had passed within 50 feet of a gas station, a daycare center, and an apartment complex. At the daycare, staff had moved 14 children into a windowless bathroom minutes before the tornado hit. The walls shook, the ceiling tiles fell, but the children emerged unharmed. The daycare director later said they had practiced the drill a week earlier. That practice combined with the warning made the difference. The response effort was swift and well coordinated. Within 30 minutes of the tornado lifting, the Red Cross had opened a shelter at a local high school. The United Way set up a hotline for donations. Volunteers arrived with chainsaws, bottled water, and tarps. The National Guard was not needed, but local law enforcement conducted door-to-door searches to make sure no one was trapped in the debris. The cleanup took weeks. Insurance adjusters processed thousands of claims. The city of Fargo waived building permit fees for tornado repairs. The state of North Dakota applied for a federal disaster declaration, which was approved. FEMA provided assistance to homeowners and renters. And then the questions began, not just about what happened, but about what could happen next. The Fargo tornado was a reminder that tornadoes are not just a threat in Tornado Alley. The Red River Valley, with its flat, open terrain, is actually a prime area for tornado formation. The region averages about 30 tornadoes per year, most of them weak. But as the climate changes, the conditions that produce strong tornadoes may become more common. Warmer temperatures and increased moisture in the atmosphere fuel instability. The 2018 Fargo tornado may have been a warning shot. How could this have happened? It happened because a cold front from Canada collided with warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico. The clash produced thunderstorms that quickly became severe. The storm that produced the tornado was what meteorologists call a supercell, a rotating thunderstorm with a mesocyclone at its core. The rotation tightened and lowered, forming a wall cloud and then a funnel. That process took less than 20 minutes. In that sense, the tornado was not surprising. The ingredients were all there, but the outcome was surprising. 0 deaths from an EF2 tornado in a city of over 100,000 people is almost unheard of. To understand why, you have to look at not just the weather but the culture of preparedness in North Dakota. The state experiences severe weather regularly. Schools conduct tornado drills. Most homes have basements. The emergency management system is well-funded and well-trained. And the public is used to heeding warnings. All of that converged on the evening of June 17th to produce a rare result, a close call that never turned into a tragedy. That does not mean the story is over. It means the story is a lesson. The same system that worked that night could fail under different circumstances. A nighttime tornado, a multi-day outbreak, a storm that hits a stadium or a festival, each scenario would test the limits of the warning infrastructure. The Fargo tornado was a success, but success can breed complacency. The challenge for everyone involved, meteorologists, emergency managers, elected officials, and the public, is to remember that every near miss is also a rehearsal for the next one. And so the investigation continued not into what went wrong, but into what went right and how to make sure it goes right again. The National Weather Service produced a detailed service assessment. The city of Fargo updated its emergency operations plan. The Red Cross expanded its shelter capacity. The stories of the families who survived were collected and shared as examples of what to do. The tornado itself, its path measured in miles and minutes, became a benchmark. But the human scale of the event is what stays. A mother who grabbed her children and ran to the basement just as the windows exploded. A truck driver who pulled over and watched his trailer lift off and disappear into the sky. A storm spotter who saw the funnel and made the call that set everything in motion. These are not abstract data points. They are the real architecture of survival. What happened in Fargo on June 17, 2018 was a tornado. But what also happened was a demonstration of how preparation, timing, and luck can intersect. The question that lingers is whether that intersection will hold the next time. The first official report of damage came in at 7:46 p.m. from a dispatcher in Cass County. A tree had fallen on a car near the intersection of 45th Street and 13th Avenue South. No injuries. At 7:48, another call came in. A garage had collapsed on 32nd Avenue. Then at 7:50, a third call. A roof had been torn off a house on 54th Street. The calls kept coming. By 7:55, the dispatch center was receiving one call every 30 seconds. The tornado was still on the ground. At 7:57, the National Weather Service in Grand Forks issued a tornado emergency for the city of Fargo. This is the highest level of alert. It means a confirmed tornado is moving through a populated area and catastrophic damage is expected. The message went out over NOAA weather radios, television stations, and mobile phones. The warning was specific. A large and extremely dangerous tornado is near Fargo, moving north at 30 miles per hour. Take cover now. At 8:03 p.m., the tornado crossed Interstate 94. The Interstate is a major east-west route through Fargo. At that time, traffic was moderate. Several drivers later reported seeing the funnel cloud ahead of them. One driver, a trucker hauling auto parts, pulled over under an overpass. He later said he watched the tornado lift a minivan off the road and spin it twice before dropping it in a ditch. The driver of the minivan survived with minor injuries. She had unbuckled her seatbelt and curled up on the floorboards. At 8:05, the tornado entered the Lindenwood Park neighborhood. This was a residential area with older homes, mature trees, and narrow streets. The tornado was now at its peak intensity. Winds were estimated at 130 miles per hour. It tore through a 5-block stretch, snapping power poles, uprooting trees, and collapsing roofs. One home was lifted off its foundation and set down again, rotated 30 degrees. The family inside had taken shelter in the basement. They emerged to find their house facing a different direction. At 8:08, the tornado struck the Cashwise Foods grocery store at the corner of 13th Avenue and 25th Street. The store was still open. Employees had heard the warning and moved customers to the back of the store away from windows. The tornado ripped off a section of the roof and collapsed a wall. The store's refrigeration system ruptured, releasing coolant. No one was killed. One employee suffered a broken arm from falling debris. She was treated and released from the hospital the same night. At 8:10, the tornado crossed the Red River and entered Moorhead, Minnesota. The transition from North Dakota to Minnesota was immediate. The tornado was still strong, but its path began to narrow. The damage in Moorhead was less severe. Several barns were destroyed and a church lost its steeple, but the worst was over. By 8:15, the tornado had dissipated into a line of strong winds and heavy rain. The entire event, from first touchdown to dissipation, had lasted 42 minutes. In the aftermath, the city of Fargo was left with a scar. The damage path was 3.7 miles long and up to 400 yards wide. 220 structures were damaged, including 50 that were destroyed. The estimated property damage was $50 million, but the human toll was zero. No deaths, no critical injuries, that was the headline, but the questions soon followed. How did a tornado of this magnitude moving through a densely populated area cause no fatalities? The answer required a closer look at the warning system, the response, and the decisions made by individuals in the moments before impact. The National Weather Service had issued the first tornado warning at 7:12 p.m. based on radar signatures. That warning covered the area where the tornado would later form, but the storm was still developing. The warning was a precaution. At 7:23, the storm spotter saw the funnel. At 7:24, the warning was upgraded. That gave residents 35 minutes of lead time before the tornado hit the city limits. 35 minutes is an eternity in tornado terms. The average lead time for a tornado warning is about 13 minutes. In some cases, it can be as little as 5. The Fargo tornado gave people time, but lead time alone does not guarantee survival. People have to act on the warning. In Fargo, they did. The city's emergency management system had a plan. The outdoor sirens were activated at 7:25 p.m. as soon as the warning was upgraded. The sirens are tested every Wednesday at noon, so residents were familiar with the sound. When they heard the sirens that evening, many already knew what to do. They went to basements, interior rooms, and storm shelters. They did not go outside to watch. They did not wait for confirmation. Schools in the area had also practiced. The Fargo Public Schools District conducts tornado drills twice a year. On June 17th, several schools were still in session for summer programs. At 7:25, the elementary school on 25th Street began moving children into the hallways. The drill had been practiced just 2 weeks earlier. The children knew to sit facing the wall, heads down, hands over their necks. A teacher later described it as routine. That routine, repeated until it became automatic, was likely one reason no children were hurt. At the same time, hospitals and nursing homes went into lockdown. The Sanford Medical Center, the largest hospital in the region, moved patients into interior corridors. The power system was switched to backup generators. The emergency room prepared for mass casualties that never came. A nurse later said they had expected dozens of patients. Instead, they treated only a handful of minor injuries, cuts, bruises, one case of shock. The lack of casualties was almost unsettling. But what about the people who did not hear the warning? There were some. The indoor warning system relies on NOAA weather radios, television, and mobile alerts. In 2018, most smartphones had wireless emergency alerts enabled. But those alerts are not always received. Cellular towers can be damaged, networks can be overwhelmed, and some phones may not be configured to receive the alerts. In the aftermath of the Fargo tornado, a small survey found that about 5% of residents in the affected area said they did not receive any warning. Some were at work in buildings without windows. Others were driving with the radio off. 2 people reported that they only realized a tornado was approaching when they saw trees snapping outside their windows. Those people survived because of luck. They were in houses with basements and had enough time to get there. But the close call highlighted a gap. The system worked for most people, but not for everyone. The question of why some alerts failed to reach all recipients remains an area of active research. The Federal Communications Commission and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration continue to study ways to improve the reliability and reach of wireless emergency alerts. The Fargo tornado also raised questions about building codes. The homes that were destroyed were mostly older structures built before modern wind-resistant standards were adopted. Newer homes in Fargo are required to have hurricane clips or straps that anchor the roof to the walls. Those homes generally fared better. In neighborhoods where the building code was enforced, the damage was less extensive. The tornado exposed a disparity. Older homes, often occupied by lower-income families, were more vulnerable. This is a pattern seen in many disasters. The poor and the elderly are disproportionately affected because they live in older, less fortified housing. In Fargo, no one died, but the economic impact was uneven. The recovery process began almost immediately. The city of Fargo established a disaster assistance center at the Civic Center. Residents could apply for FEMA assistance, insurance claims, and small business loans. The Red Cross distributed food, water, and cleaning supplies. Volunteers from local churches and universities helped with debris removal. Within a week, most roads were cleared. Within a month, temporary roofs had been installed on damaged homes, but the emotional recovery took longer. The National Weather Service conducted its damage survey on June 18th. The team walked the entire path, documenting the damage and classifying the intensity. They confirmed the tornado was an EF2 with estimated winds of 130 miles per hour. They also noted that the tornado had been partially rain-wrapped, meaning it was difficult to see from a distance. This is a dangerous characteristic because it can catch people off guard. The rain-wrapped nature of the tornado made the spotter's sighting at 7:23 even more critical. Without that visual confirmation, the warning might have been less specific. The survey also revealed that the tornado had produced a debris cloud that rose to an estimated 8,000 feet. This debris was later found scattered across the countryside, including a photograph of a family from a destroyed home that landed 30 miles away. The photo was returned to the family through a Facebook group. It was a small gesture in a large mess. The Fargo tornado was part of a larger weather pattern. The same storm system had produced tornadoes in Minnesota and South Dakota earlier that day. One tornado in South Dakota had killed a farmer in his field. The Fargo tornado was the strongest of the outbreak, but it was not the deadliest. That distinction belonged to a smaller tornado that hit a rural area where no warning was issued because the storm was not on radar until it was too late. The Fargo tornado was a success story, but it was surrounded by failures. What made Fargo different? Geography played a role. The Red River Valley is flat and open, which allows radar to see storms clearly. In other parts of the country, hills and trees can block radar beams. Meteorologists in Grand Forks had a clear view of the storm from the moment it formed. They were able to track its rotation and issue warnings with confidence. That is not always possible in, say, the Appalachian foothills or the Pacific Northwest. The culture of preparedness also mattered. North Dakota ranks among the highest states in the nation for tornado drills and public awareness. The state's emergency management agency conducts annual exercises. Schools practice, hospitals practice. The public is accustomed to severe weather. In the hours before the Fargo tornado, local television stations had been covering the storm threat all day. By the time the warning was issued, people were already watching. The information did not come out of nowhere. The response after the tornado also revealed strengths. The city of Fargo had a well-rehearsed emergency operations center. The mayor activated the city's emergency plan within minutes of the first damage report. The police and fire departments were already staging resources. The Red Cross had a shelter open before the tornado had even lifted. Coordination between local, county, and state agencies was smooth. There were no communication breakdowns, no jurisdictional disputes. It was, by all accounts, a textbook response. But the textbook response does not answer the deeper question. The question that lingers after every near-miss disaster. What happens next time? The ingredients that made the Fargo tornado survivable, timely warning, public compliance, structural basements, swift response, may not all be present in the next event. A tornado at 2 a.m. when people are asleep would have a much higher death toll. A tornado that hits a school during a packed assembly would test the limits of even the best drills. A tornado in a city with fewer basements like Houston or Phoenix would force people into less safe shelters. The Fargo tornado also raised a question about the limits of the warning system. The National Weather Service issues warnings based on radar and spotter reports, but the technology is not perfect. Doppler radar can only detect rotation at a certain altitude. It cannot see the funnel cloud itself. The warning is a prediction, not an observation. In the case of the Fargo tornado, the prediction was accurate, but there are many examples where the warning came too late or did not come at all. The deadliest tornado in modern U.S. history, the Joplin tornado of 2011, had a warning lead time of about 20 minutes, yet still killed 158 people. The difference was not just warning time, it was the building construction, the time of day, and the fact that many people in Joplin did not have basements. The Fargo tornado was a reminder that the system works best when the public trusts it and knows what to do. Trust is built over time. North Dakota, the trust has been earned through years of accurate warnings and community outreach. But trust can be broken by one false alarm. The National Weather Service has a policy of prioritizing safety over precision. They would rather issue a warning that turns out to be a false alarm than miss a tornado. That policy saves lives, but it also creates a cry wolf effect. In some parts of the country, people have become desensitized to warnings because so many are issued and then nothing happens. In Fargo, that desensitization did not occur. The public still took every warning seriously. The meteorologists who tracked the storm that night later reflected on the event. They described the feeling of watching the radar and knowing that a tornado was forming, but not knowing exactly where it would touch down. They felt the weight of responsibility. One forecaster said he stayed at his console for hours after the warning expired, monitoring the damage reports and checking for injuries. When he learned there were no deaths, he said he felt relief but also a sense of unease. He knew that luck had been on their side. The luck factor is uncomfortable. It does not fit neatly into the narrative of preparedness and response, but it is real. The tornado could have taken a slightly different path and hit a crowded shopping mall. It could have touched down 10 minutes earlier when people were still on the roads. It could have been stronger. There is no way to control for those variables. The only thing that can be controlled is the preparation. And in Fargo, the preparation was excellent, but preparation has to be maintained. After the tornado, the city of Fargo updated its emergency plan. The sirens were tested more frequently. The school district added an extra tornado drill per year. The local television stations invested in better graphics and storm coverage. The National Weather Service conducted a public outreach campaign to encourage people to buy NOAA weather radios. These are incremental improvements. The bigger question is systemic. The Fargo tornado exposed the fact that the warning system, while effective, is only as strong as its weakest link. The weak link in many cases is the individual's ability to receive and act on a warning. The outdoor sirens are limited. The mobile alerts are not guaranteed. The television and radio require the person to be tuned in. The most reliable method is the NOAA weather radio, which can wake a person in the middle of the night, but not everyone has one. In Fargo, about 40% of households owned a weather radio. That number is higher than the national average, but it is still a minority. The solution is not simple. It involves public education, technology improvements, and community engagement. It requires a sustained investment in the infrastructure of warnings. The Fargo tornado showed what is possible when that infrastructure works. It also showed how close the margin can be. The families who lost their homes rebuilt. Some stayed in Fargo, others moved away. The insurance payouts covered most of the losses, but not all. One family had to take out a second mortgage to cover the gap between their insurance and the cost of rebuilding. Another family chose not to rebuild, instead selling the lot and moving to a different part of the city. The physical scars healed. The emotional scars took longer. The storm spotter who made the critical sighting was named in local news reports. He was a volunteer with the North Dakota Skywarn program. He had been a spotter for over 20 years. He said that night was the closest he had ever come to a tornado. He had watched it form from a hilltop southwest of the city. He radioed the coordinates to the National Weather Service and then drove away. He later said he did not feel like a hero. He felt like he had done his job. The meteorologist in Grand Forks who issued the warning also stayed quiet. He did not seek media attention. He said the real credit belonged to the people who took shelter. He was right, but he was also modest. The warning was precise. The timing was exact. The communication was clear. All of that came from years of training and experience. The Fargo tornado of 2018 was not a historic disaster. It will not appear in the textbooks alongside the Tri-State tornado of 1925 or the Joplin tornado of 2001. But it deserves attention because it is a model of what disaster mitigation can achieve. It is a story of a near miss that did not have to be a near miss. It is a story of systems, people, and a little bit of chance. What happened on June 17th in Fargo, North Dakota was not just a tornado, it was a test, and it passed. But the next test is coming. The season never ends, the atmosphere keeps turning, the ingredients keep assembling, and somewhere a storm is gathering that will put every system and every person to the test again. The question is not whether that storm will come, it is whether the lessons of Fargo will still be remembered when it does. At 5:12 p.m. on the 17th of June 2018, the first structure was hit. It was a metal storage building on the southwestern edge of Fargo. The building crumpled. The tornado had just touched down. It was moving northeast at roughly 30 miles per hour. The National Weather Service had issued the warning at 4:56 p.m. that gave residents 16 minutes of lead time. In the context of tornado warnings, 16 minutes is generous. Many tornadoes give less than 5. The damage survey began the next morning. Teams from the National Weather Service office in Grand Forks drove out to the path. They walked the debris field. They measured the width of the damage. They looked at the type of destruction. Trees snapped, roofs torn off, walls collapsed. They used the enhanced Fujita scale to rate the tornado. The rating came back as EF2. That means winds between 111 and 135 miles per hour. It is strong enough to destroy a mobile home, rip the roof off a well-built house, and lift a car off the ground. But it is not the strongest. EF3, EF4, and EF5 are more violent. Fargo got lucky again. The survey team documented a path length of about 8 miles. The width varied. At its widest, the tornado was about 400 yards across. That is a quarter mile. Not a large tornado by Midwest standards, but large enough to cause significant damage. The team counted over 100 structures that were damaged or destroyed. Most were single-family homes, some were apartment buildings, one was a school. The school was an elementary school in the northern part of the path. It was empty. The school year had ended a week earlier. The summer cleaning crew had already left for the day. The tornado tore off a section of the roof and collapsed a wall in the gymnasium. If the school had been in session, the outcome would have been different. The children would have been in the building. The teachers would have been in the building. The tornado struck at 5:20 p.m. after school hours. The decision to end the school year a week before the summer solstice turned out to be a decision that saved lives. No one planned it that way. It was just the calendar, but not every structure was empty. One apartment complex took a direct hit. It was a 2-story wood frame building built in the 1970s. The tornado ripped off the roof and collapsed the upper floor. About 30 people were inside. They had taken shelter in the basement. The basement was a common area with concrete walls and no windows. When the building collapsed above them, the debris blocked the stairwell. They were trapped. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. They used chainsaws and crowbars to clear the entrance. Everyone came out alive. Some had minor cuts and bruises. One woman had a broken arm. No one died. That story repeated itself across the path. Families huddled in basements while their homes were torn apart above them. The basements held. The foundation walls stayed intact. The floor joists above them gave way, but the concrete did not. In Fargo, basements are not optional. The frost line goes deep. Building codes require foundations to extend below the frost line, which is about 4 feet. That means every house has a basement. The basement becomes a de facto storm shelter. In other parts of the country where the frost line is shallow, basements are rare. That is one reason why tornado death rates are higher in the South and the Midwest than in the northern plains. The infrastructure of survival is built into the ground. After the damage survey, the National Weather Service issued a full report. It included the storm's track, the estimated wind speeds, and the structural failures. The report also noted that the tornado was accompanied by large hail. Hailstones up to 2 inches in diameter were reported in the same area. That added to the property damage. Cars were dented, windows were broken, roofs were punctured. The hail came before the tornado. That sequence gave some residents an extra warning. When they heard the hail, they knew something was wrong. Some of them went to the basement before the sirens sounded. The hail also provided a clue to the meteorologists. Hail is a sign of strong updrafts. Updrafts are what spin a thunderstorm into a supercell. The storm that produced the Fargo tornado was a classic supercell. It had a well-defined hook echo on the radar. The rotation was strong. The meteorologist in Grand Forks saw the hook echo at 4:45 p.m. He issued the warning 11 minutes later. That timing was critical. If he had waited another 5 minutes, the tornado would have already started its descent. The warning would have arrived as the tornado was touching down. The lead time would have been cut in half. The technology that allowed that warning is called dual polarization radar. It was installed on the National Weather Service's network of WSR-8D radars starting in 2003. Dual-pol radar sends out both horizontal and vertical pulses. It can detect the shape of objects in the air. Raindrops are wide and flat, hail is round and hard, debris is irregular. When a tornado kicks up debris, the radar sees it as a distinct signature. That signature is called the debris ball. The debris ball appears as a small, bright spot on the radar image. It is the definitive sign that a tornado is on the ground. In the case of the Fargo tornado, the debris ball appeared at 5:14 p.m. That was 2 minutes after the first structure was hit. The warning had already been issued, but the debris ball confirmed the tornado was doing damage. The meteorologists used that information to refine the track. They updated the warning to include specific street names. They told residents in the northern part of the city that the tornado was heading their way. That allowed police to block off intersections. It allowed the school district to confirm that no children were in the affected school. It allowed the hospital to prepare for incoming patients. The information flow was fast and accurate, but the flow depended on a chain of people. The radar operator in Grand Forks, the spotter on the hill, the dispatcher at the Emergency Operations Center, the police officer on the radio, the television meteorologist on the air, the family member who shouted, "Get to the basement." Every link held. If any link had broken, the outcome could have been different. Consider the spotter. He was a volunteer. He had been trained by the National Weather Service to identify cloud features. He had a radio tuned to the Skywarn frequency. He knew the coordinates of his location. He reported the tornado at 5:10 p.m. That was 2 minutes before it hit the first structure. His report reached the National Weather Service via a repeater network. The network is maintained by amateur radio operators. They are volunteers too. They keep the frequencies open and the repeaters working. Without them, the spotter's report might not have been heard. The spotter's report was then relayed to the warning coordination meteorologist. That person made the decision to update the warning. The warning was transmitted through multiple channels: NOAA weather radio, the emergency alert system, cell phone alerts, and social media. The cell phone alerts were the most direct. They went to every phone with a location in the warned area. The alert was a short text: tornado warning in this area until 5:45 p.m. Take shelter immediately. It was not a long message. It did not explain the science. It was an instruction, and people followed it. That is not always the case. In some communities, people ignore tornado warnings. They think it will not happen to them. They think the sirens are false alarms. They think they have time. In Fargo, the public had been educated over decades. The city had experienced close calls before. The memory of the 1957 tornado that killed 10 people still lingered. The culture of preparedness was real. That culture is not automatic. It is built through repeated drills, public service announcements, school programs, and media coverage. It requires investment. The city of Fargo spends money on its emergency management office. The school district spends time on drills. The television stations spend resources on coverage. All of that spending pays off when a tornado hits, but the spending also creates a paradox. The more prepared a community is, the less visible the disaster becomes. Because no one dies, the story does not make national headlines. The federal government does not declare a disaster. FEMA does not arrive. The insurance companies pay the claims quietly. The rebuilding happens without fanfare. The near miss is forgotten, and the lessons are not shared. That is why the Fargo tornado matters beyond Fargo. It is a case study in what works. It is also a case study in what could go wrong. The same conditions that made the near miss possible could change. The population is growing. New residents move in every year. Some of them come from places where tornadoes are rare. They do not know what to do when the sirens go off. They might not have a basement in their new house. The housing stock is changing too. New construction sometimes puts basements in the back of the priority list. Builders offer slab-on-grade foundations to save money. The city's building code requires basements for residential buildings, but there are exceptions. If the trend continues, the infrastructure of survival could erode. The storm itself could change too. The climate is warming. The atmosphere holds more moisture. That fuels thunderstorms. But the relationship between climate change and tornadoes is complex. The frequency of tornadoes may not change much, but the intensity could increase. The season could shift. The geographic range could expand. The Fargo tornado was an EF2. The next one could be an EF4. Basements would still protect people, but the damage would be greater. The recovery would take longer, the cost would be higher, and the warning system, while excellent, has limits. The radar can see the rotation, but it cannot see the ground. The warning is a prediction. It is based on probability. Sometimes the prediction is wrong. Sometimes the tornado does not form. Sometimes it forms but dissipates quickly. Sometimes it strengthens without warning. The National Weather Service is aware of these limits. They are working on better algorithms. They are experimenting with artificial intelligence to detect patterns in radar data. They are deploying more surface observation stations. They are training more spotters. But the technology will never be perfect. The human element will always be the weak link, the person who chooses not to take shelter, the person who does not have a weather radio, the person who misinterprets the warning, the person who is visiting from out of town and does not know the local geography, the person who is deaf and cannot hear the sirens, the person who is elderly and cannot get to the basement. The system is designed for the average person. It does not always reach the margins. In the Fargo tornado, the margins were covered. There were no deaths. There were few injuries, but the margins were narrow. One family reported that they did not hear the sirens because they were vacuuming. They only went to the basement when their neighbor called. Another family said they had no basement. They huddled in an interior bathroom. That bathroom was spared. The rest of the house was destroyed. If the tornado had been slightly stronger, the bathroom might not have held. The planning for the next tornado began the day after this one. The city updated its emergency plan again. The school district reviewed its drill procedures. The National Weather Service conducted a post-event analysis. The results were published in a technical memorandum. The memorandum included recommendations for improving the spotter network and refining the warning text. It was a dry document full of terms like lead time, false alarm rate, and probability of detection, but behind the jargon was a human story. It was about the seconds that separated survival from tragedy. The memorandum also included a map of the damage path. That map showed how close the tornado came to the city's main hospital. The hospital was less than a mile from the edge of the path. If the tornado had shifted slightly, the hospital would have been damaged. The patients would have needed to be evacuated. The emergency room would have been out of service. That would have complicated the response. But the tornado did not shift. The map showed a margin of error measured in football fields. The margins matter. They are the difference between a story that ends with a statistic and a story that ends with a name. The Fargo tornado ended with statistics: 0 deaths, 18 injuries, $80 million in damage. The number 80 million is large, but it is manageable. It is a fraction of the cost of a single death. The economic input from insurance payouts and rebuilding actually stimulates the local economy. The disaster becomes a footnote, but the footnotes accumulate. Every near miss is a reminder that the next one might be a direct hit. The question is not whether the system will fail. The question is when and where. The Fargo tornado was a test that the system passed. But the system itself is a human invention. It is made of people, policies, and machines. It is fallible, it is vulnerable, it is only as strong as the trust that holds it together. And trust is fragile. It can be broken by one failure, one warning that comes too late, one siren that does not sound, one decision that prioritizes budget over safety. The trust that the residents of Fargo have in their warning system was built over generations. It cannot be rebuilt overnight. The tornado of 2018 reinforced that trust, but it also tested it. The people who heard the sirens and went to the basement did so because they believed that the sirens meant danger. They did not question the timing. They did not second-guess the message. That obedience is rare. In other places, people have died because they stopped to look outside. They wanted to see the tornado. They did not believe the warning. That disbelief is human. It is the same instinct that makes people ignore fire alarms in hotels. It is the belief that nothing bad will happen to me. In Fargo, that instinct was overridden by a culture of caution. The caution is not fear, it is respect. The respect comes from knowing that the planes can turn violent without warning. The respect is passed down from parents to children. It is reinforced by every drill, every broadcast, and every near miss. The Fargo tornado was another chapter in that story, but the story is not finished. The season continues. The atmosphere will keep producing storms. The next tornado could be the one that breaks the streak. The next one could be the one that kills. The people who survived the 2018 tornado know that. They lived through it, they saw the destruction. They felt the wind, they heard the roar, they carry that memory with them. They know that next time the luck might run out. The meteorologists know it too. They watch the radar every spring. They issue warnings every summer. They hold their breath every time a supercell forms. They know that the margin between a near miss and a catastrophe is measured in minutes and miles. They prepare for the worst. They hope for the best. They keep the radios on. On the morning of June 17, 2018 at 9:38 a.m. Central Daylight Time, the National Weather Service office in Grand Forks, North Dakota, issued a tornado warning for Cass County. The warning was based on radar-indicated rotation in a severe thunderstorm moving northeast at 35 miles per hour. The storm had been producing large hail and damaging winds for over an hour. At 9:42 a.m., a spotter reported a funnel cloud near the town of Mapleton, about 13 miles southwest of downtown Fargo. The rotation tightened. By 9:45 a.m., the vortex touched down in an open field just west of the intersection of Cass County Road 16 and 170th Avenue South. The tornado was on the ground. It was moving directly toward the city. The touchdown point was a field of wheat still green. The tornado lifted dirt and debris into a dark column that quickly became visible from miles away. At 9:47 a.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado emergency, the highest level of warning, declaring that a confirmed tornado was moving into a densely populated area. The sirens in Fargo began sounding at 9:49 a.m. At that moment, tens of thousands of people began moving to basements, interior rooms, and designated shelters. The sequence was not a drill. It was not a test, it was the real thing. The tornado strengthened as it crossed 19th Avenue South. At 9:51 a.m., it reached EF2 intensity with winds estimated between 113 and 126 miles per hour. The damage path widened to a third of a mile. It struck a residential subdivision, damaging 105 homes. 4 of those homes were destroyed. One of them was a split-level house on Oak View Drive. The family inside had just moved to Fargo from California. They had never experienced a tornado before. They did not have a basement. They did not know the floor plan. They huddled in the garage, which was the only room without windows. The tornado stripped the roof off the house and collapsed the garage door. The family survived, but they were trapped for nearly an hour before emergency crews reached them. They had no way to call for help. The cell towers were down. At 9:56 a.m., the tornado entered the Moorhead industrial area just west of the Red River. The warehouses and metal buildings along 34th Street North were not designed to withstand EF2 winds. The roofs were peeled back. The walls buckled. One warehouse stored boats and recreational vehicles. The tornado scattered them across a quarter mile. A large boat landed on top of a school bus that was parked in a lot. The bus was empty, no one was inside. By 10:02 a.m., the tornado began to weaken as it moved into a less developed area north of town. The rotation became ragged, the debris cloud spread out, the funnel narrowed. At 10:07 a.m., it lifted back into the cloud base, having traveled 14.7 miles. The entire event lasted 22 minutes. The damage path was a scar across the city, a line of broken trees, torn shingles, scattered insulation, and shattered glass. What investigators found in the days after was not just a damage survey. They found a set of decisions and systems that had worked exactly as intended. The meteorologist at the Grand Forks National Weather Service office had issued the warning 11 minutes before the tornado touched down. The average lead time for tornado warnings in the United States is 13 minutes. That extra 11 minutes gave people time to reach shelter. But the lead time was not the only factor. The warning message itself was specific. It included the phrase tornado emergency. That term is reserved for situations where a confirmed tornado is about to strike a populated area. It triggers a different response from broadcasters. It interrupts programming. It appears on weather apps with a red banner. It cuts through the noise. The Fargo Emergency Management Office had practiced for this moment. The city had conducted an annual tornado drill every spring since 2005. The drill involved the entire community, including schools, hospitals, and businesses. It was not a theoretical exercise. It was a real-time test of the siren system, the public address systems in schools, and the internal communication networks for first responders. In 2018, that test made the difference. When the real tornado warning was issued, the schools went into lockdown within 2 minutes. The hospitals moved patients into hallways. The county dispatch received 2,300 calls in the first 15 minutes after the warning. Every call was answered. No one was left waiting. But the system also revealed gaps. The tornado struck a trailer park on the west side of town. Mobile homes are not safe in any tornado, even a weak one. The residents did not have basements. The park had no designated shelter. 14 people were injured in that trailer park alone. Most of the injuries were caused by debris, broken glass, flying siding, and overturned furniture. One man was hit in the leg by a piece of the roof. He survived, but the leg was broken in 2 places. The trailer park was destroyed. The residents had no homes to return to. The Red Cross set up a temporary shelter, but many of them did not have insurance. The state eventually provided some assistance, but the recovery was slow. The question that emerged from the debris was not about the warning. That part worked. The question was about equity. The neighborhoods with basements had almost no injuries. The neighborhoods without basements had the majority of injuries. The difference was not about preparedness. It was about income. The trailer park residents knew the tornado was coming. They heard the sirens. They had a place to hide, a bathroom, a closet, a friend's house. But none of those locations provided the same level of protection as a basement. The physics of a tornado do not care about fairness. The wind treats everyone the same, but the infrastructure of survival is not distributed equally. That reality has implications that go beyond a single storm. Cities across the Great Plains have trailer parks and mobile home communities. They are often located on cheap land near the edges of towns. Those are the same areas that tornadoes tend to hit first because they are on the leading edge of the storm. The people who live there are often renters, not homeowners. They have less access to information. They may have language barriers. They may be undocumented, afraid to call for help. The system is designed for the people who own houses with basements. It is not designed for the people who live in the trailer parks. In the months after the Fargo tornado, the city council held a hearing. The topic was building codes for mobile home parks. The discussion was tense. Some residents wanted to require storm shelters in every park. The developers argued that the cost would drive up rents and push people out. The city's attorney said that the state did not have a mandate for shelters in mobile home parks. The council ultimately voted to require shelters for any new park, but existing parks were grandfathered in. The trailer park that was destroyed never rebuilt. The land was sold to a developer who built a strip mall. The families who had lived there scattered to other parks, some without shelters. The cycle continued. The National Weather Service conducted a detailed survey of the public response to the tornado. They interviewed 140 people. The results were published in 2019. The survey found that 97% of respondents who heard the warning took some form of protective action. That number is extraordinarily high. Most communities see compliance rates around 70%. The reason for the high compliance was not just the siren, it was the repetition. The residents had heard the siren many times before during drills. They had internalized the response. They did not hesitate, but the survey also found a worrying trend. The people who did not take shelter were mostly young adults, new residents, or people visiting from out of town. They did not know the local protocol. They did not have a weather radio. They relied on social media, but the social media messages were not always accurate. One woman said she saw a Facebook post that the tornado was heading north, but it was actually heading east. She stayed on her porch to take a video. She was knocked off her feet by the wind. She survived with bruises, but she could have been killed. The lesson from the survey was clear. The system works best for the people who have been trained by the system. For everyone else, the system is a puzzle. The tornado does not care about the puzzle. The tornado does not wait. The aftermath of the Fargo tornado also revealed the limits of emotional resilience. The survivors who were most affected were not the ones who lost property. They were the ones who saw the tornado coming from a window. They were the ones who felt the pressure drop and heard the freight train sound. They were the ones who thought they were going to die. The psychological toll was measured by the number of crisis counseling sessions requested. The Red Cross ran a program that offered free counseling for 60 days. More than 400 people used it. The most common phrase reported by counselors was, "I never thought it would happen here." That sentence captures something essential. Every tornado is a surprise, even when it is expected. The human brain cannot prepare for the reality of a tornado until it is experienced. The sound is louder than any recording. The wind is stronger than any video. The debris field is wider than any photograph. The survivors who lived through the Fargo tornado carried that reality with them. Some were afraid to sleep during thunderstorms for a year. Some moved away. Some refused to go to the basement ever again. They said the basement felt like a coffin. The city recognized that the recovery was not just physical. They hired a disaster psychologist to work with the school district. The psychologist trained teachers on how to identify signs of post-traumatic stress in children. The teachers reported that many children drew pictures of the tornado in art class. The pictures showed black clouds, green skies, and people running. The children were processing the event visually. The psychologist recommended that the school continue the tornado drills but with more explanation. The drills should not just be practice. They should be teaching moments. The long-term impact of the Fargo tornado is still being studied. The event is considered a near-perfect success by most metrics, but the success was not automatic. It was the result of decades of investment in forecasting, public education, and infrastructure. The National Weather Service had spent years improving the radar network. The city had spent millions on the siren system. The schools had dedicated time for drills. The families had talked about the plan. The success was a product of preparation, but preparation is not permanent. It must be maintained. The next generation of residents may not have the hurricane of 2019. They may not have been there, they may not remember the sound, they may not know where the basement is. The city must teach them again. The tornado will come again. The question is whether the lesson will stick. In the end, the Fargo tornado of 2018 is a story about choices. The meteorologists chose to issue the warning early. The officials chose to sound the sirens. The people chose to go to the basement. The system worked because the choices aligned, but the alignment was fragile. One wrong choice could have changed the outcome. One delayed warning, one confused resident, one broken siren, and the story would have been different. The margins are always thin, the sky is always watching, and the radios are always on.